additions or deletions to the agenda? Hearing none, have a motion to approve.
So moved. Second.
Seconder, any discussion? None, motion carried. So first on the agenda, the most exciting item of the night is the audit report. Mr. Aaron Kelly, you're going to give us a cold version of what the audit committee met with Mr. Kelly last week, and we were pleased with what we saw, so he's going to give us kind of a cold version today.
Yep.
Yeah.
So as Ben said, this will be the condensed version. If you want the long-winded version, get on the audit committee. So we're going to start right on the independent auditor's report. That's page 1. So the first paragraph, and this is the most important, is our opinion. So in our opinion, these statements present fairly in all material respects the financial position of the town of Digby as at March 31st. So that is a clean audit opinion, which is what we'd expect to see. The basis of our opinion, so we have conducted our audit in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards. We believe that the audit evidence we have obtained is sufficient and appropriate to provide the basis for our opinion. There's an other matter paragraph. So pages 8 to 14 are not required by the accounting standards, but they do provide a lot of additional information and color to the statements. So they are there as extra information, and they are only audited to the extent required to express opinion on the statements as a whole. Responsibilities of management and those charged with governance. So management here would be Tom and Matthew. Those charged with governance, everybody that gets elected. So management is responsible for the preparation and fair presentation of these statements in accordance with Canadian public sector accounting standards. That's the accounting framework that you're required to report under. And for such internal controls as they deem necessary to enable the preparation of the statements to be free from material misstatement, whether due to fraud or error. In preparing the consolidated statements, management is also responsible for assessing the town's ability to continue as a going concern. Going concern, basically, do you exist 12 months from now? And those charged with governance are responsible for overseeing the overall reporting process of the town. Our responsibilities as auditors is to obtain reasonable assurance. It's a high level of assurance, but it's not a guarantee. Misstatements can arise from fraud or error. They're considered material if they would individually or in aggregate influence the opinion of a reasonable user. So as we've said before, this is not an audit for fraud. We are always suspicious of fraud. We're always using our professional judgment, but that is not specifically what we're looking for. It's a financial statement audit. Also, during our process, we have to identify and assess risks. So we assess the operations of the town every year during our planning procedures. We want to spend the most of our audit time on the areas that we deem to be of higher risk. Though we do audit everything, we just spend more time in the areas of higher risk. We have to obtain an understanding of your internal controls. We don't audit them, but we do have to understand theoretically how they work and how they're implemented. We evaluate the appropriateness of your accounting policies and accounting estimates and any related disclosures. We conclude on the appropriateness of your use of the going concern basis of accounting. So we have no issues. You are a going concern. And we evaluate the overall presentation structure of the statements. And then last, we communicate with those charged with governance regarding these matters. So that's in both our meeting with the audit committee and then this formal presentation to council. So that is your audit report. That's the part that you pay the most for. Page 3 is management's responsibilities. So this is a requirement where management specifically signs that they take responsibility. These are not Grant Thornton financial statements. They are Town of Digby financial statements that we audit. So that's just your formal. So no one can say that the town didn't take responsibility. That has to be in there for public sector. Page 4 is the statement of operations. So overall revenues this year, just shy of 5.7 million. That's up $260,000 from last year, and you're about $550,000 over budget. So in terms of your budget variance, there was $130,000 more in deed transfer tax than you budgeted. Obviously, due to COVID and the housing market, that was a moving target at best. So that was expected to be a good year, but maybe not as good as you had. Then the equalization grants, that's not a budgeted item. So there was, well, you budgeted for one payment, but they gave you two payments this year, so that's 370,000. So those two things make up the vast majority of your budget variance. I'll go to page 8, where it gives a little more breakdown. There wasn't a whole lot of issues here, but we'll just kind of quickly go through the different sections in detail. So in terms of tax revenue, you have the industrial park moved a little bit. That's basically just your Scotia Harvest plant coming online and tax revenue coming in that way, which is split through the municipality. Then we see our deed transfer tax. Last year it was 95,000. This year it's 212, so almost $120,000 more. It's our single biggest mover there. Grants in lieu of taxes are basically identical and very close to budget. Services provided to other governments is down $120,000 from last year, and basically this is where your billings go to the municipality of Digby for your joint sewer services. And last year you had the force main break, which was $60,000-$70,000, and there was work done on 2 lift stations, so that's why we see the significant decrease is those 2 large items. But as you can see, your budgeted expense there versus actual is still pretty close. Sales of service, very much on par. Other revenue from owned sources, rental revenue is up a little bit, but that's just because Digby Station rented out for COVID clinics and things throughout the year, so we expect to see that move up a little bit. Penalties and interest on taxes is down. Again, that would be expected, as when COVID hit, you expedited your interest rate decrease directly from 19 to 15. You planned on a staggered approach over the years, but we expected to see that fall. Also, we'll see when we get forward a bit that your tax balance, your tax receivables are actually very low, so those two things combined together, reasonable reduction. So then under unconditional transfers, obviously the single biggest item there is your equalization grant, or the Municipal Financial Capacity and Town Foundation grant is its proper name. So that was a double payment this year, so that's why our big bump is there. Conditional transfers, the only item of note is the VIC funding. Obviously the VIC was not open in the summer of 2020, which is fiscal 21, so there was no funding. And then again, the conditional transfers from local governance is the funding you get from the municipality for the VIC as well. So those wasn't open, now it is, so that's why we see our jumps there. So if we jump back to page 4, so about 2/3 of the way down the revenue side, we get to our interest. So your metered rates, consumption is very similar. It's just a change in your rates. All public fire protection, various items, they're all very similar. Interest, you're up a little bit over last year. That's continued improved rates in the interest rate and your cash reserve, so we would expect to see that come back up a little bit. Your Canada Community Building Fund or gas tax revenue, that was a double payment this year as well, so that's why we see the increase from last year. Grants for capital projects, it's a $300,000 decrease. Last year there was the Investing in Canadian Infrastructure program. You guys got $375,000 through that for sewer projects last year. So that was the bulk of the grants for capital projects in 2021. This year, the only major project was your FRIP flood remediation program that you did some work on the Racket. So that was $99,750. So that's the variance there. So overall, significant budget variance, but when you factor in those two items that we talked about, it's very much on par. Down on your expenditure side, total expenditures for the year, $5.18 million. Compared to last year of 4.7, that's an increase of $460,000. On your budget side, you were at 5.09, so you're about $90,000 off budget. We'll jump forward to page 10 so we can get some detail. Under general government services, under council remuneration, so that's up $10,000 over last year. You didn't give yourself that big of a raise. That was last year. After Gene passed, there was a 6-month period where you were down 1 counselor, so that's why we see that bump back up again this year. Grants to organizations is up $13,000. During COVID, a lot of people weren't functioning, weren't asking you for money, so we expected to see a rebound in that. And as you can see, it's very close to your budgeted amount, so it was kind of what you expected to give. And then under other, there was some repairs and maintenance required to the old VIC on the Shore Road. That's what makes up that increase there. And overall, budgeted 756,000, came in at 778. So very, very close on your budget to actual. Protective services, the never-ending story. Your RCMP contract is more costly this year, so that's up about $40,000. Under fire protection, firefighting force, so that 32,000 last year, that's zero. That is now provided under firefighting grant down below. So we see our 32.5 go to zero, and then down at the bottom we have firefighting grants of 67.5 up from 25. So you now budget the fire department as a grant. So that's why we see that significant move there. Other than that, every item is basically on budget. You budgeted 1.39 million. You came in at 1.36. So again, you're only about $20,000 off your budget. Very, very accurate. Transportation services. So wages and benefits. So in that line, it's up about $60,000. But your public works payroll is spread amongst these various categories depending on where the staff need to go. So overall, year over year, your public works wages are only up about $30,000. And your total budgeted public works salary amongst all the categories was just about $500,000, and you were only $3,000 off your budget. So you spent basically exactly what you were looking to spend. Under other, you're up about $12,000, and that was just some additional repairs and maintenance to the public works buildings. Roads and streets is up $110,000 over last year. So basically there is $30,000 additional cost for salt, $30,000 additional cost for gas and fuel, and then $60,000 for truck repairs and maintenance. So those all salt, depending on the timing of purchases and the needs of the winter. Obviously we had a harsher winter in 2022. And then fuel, as COVID hit, we saw a big drop in price, and then obviously 2022 record highs. So those increases not entirely unexpected, and obviously that's why we see significant fluctuation from your budgeted amount as well. Gain on disposal of assets. So there was one of your old trucks had no cost base, and you sold it for $500. So that's what that is. Environmental health services. Year over year, no significant variances there. Amortization is going to fluctuate depending on the assets that are acquired, but nothing to really talk about. Public health services, you're responsible to fund the deficit of the housing authority. They just give you a bill at the end of the year depending on whatever they do in your area. No influence over that really. Environmental development services. You're almost double what you were last year, but very much on point with your budget, and that can be identified as your tourism costs. So again, the VIC was not open in the summer of 2020, so this year we see a full year of operation again, so that's where your $48,000 comes from. Under recreation and cultural services, the only significant variance there is under parks and playgrounds. So this year there was $20,000 spent on tree maintenance, but overall, year over year, it's very similar and very close to your budget as well. Source of supply, power and pumping, water treatment, those are very, very close to prior year and close to your budget numbers as well. Nothing significant in there. Transmission and distribution, so maintenance and mains is up $30,000, almost $40,000 over last year. No specifically large items in there. It just depends on the varies of what's required for maintenance. And again, you're budgeting $77,000, so you were expecting last year to be a bit of an anomaly. So, and then on the administration and general side, you budgeted 75, but you came in a lot lower. Primary would be your miscellaneous, just got more budget than turned out to be, but year over year, almost identical. So if we go back to page 4, that's how we get to our 5.18 million. So overall, that gives you an annual surplus of $514,000. So it's $190,000 less than last year. Overall, you started out the year with accumulated surplus of 16.44 million, and you ended up with an accumulated surplus just shy of 17 million. On to page 5 is the statement of financial position, or your balance sheet. So cash and cash equivalents, you're up about $400,000 over last year. That's just timing of payments. Your collections have been improved. You're building up your reserves for capital in the future. So, and then we also see our cash held in reserves, very similar to last year. Receivables are down $340,000. That is attributable to there was $172,000 accrued last year for that ISIP sewer funding that you had, and there was also that $126,000 from the municipality for sewer that was in your receivables. So those two items basically attribute to the difference. And if you want to flip back to page 20, this will give you a breakdown of how we get to our receivables number. So from a tax receivable perspective, you started out the year with $220,000 owing from the prior year tax levy, levied $3.2 million, collected $3.1 million. So you have $109,000 owing on your April 2021 levy. You have $109,000 outstanding. And then of your prior year balances of $221,000, you collected $173,000. So for aged accounts, you're only owed $47,000, which is a very healthy position to be for that. You don't have a history of loss, but I know it's been a priority of management to really press that issue and get collections going. So that's a very, very strong position to be. Then you had interest on your accounts of $7,900, so overall you have $165,000 owing on taxes receivable. That's down $70,000 from the year prior. And then it gives a little breakdown of your other receivables. HST basically the same year over year. That's where we see your $172,000 for that Investing in Canada plan. Some transfers from provincial governments, that's up a little bit. That's just timing of projects. Municipality of Digby, as I said, last year there was $126,000 in there for the sewer projects. Digby Area Recreation, you loaned them the money for their new truck purchase. Then some miscellaneous items under other receivables. And then your water rates, so net of your allowance on those accounts, is $158 as opposed to $191. So again, improved collections on your water and tax receivables. So it's a very, very positive position. So your financial assets, $4.5 million. Under liabilities, so we have tax sale surplus. So that's when you sell properties at tax sale, and there's a 6-month window where people can come back and get it. And then after that, you guys have to sit on it for 20 years. If the owner doesn't come back for it, then you get to take it into revenue. So for the longest time, it was $17,260, but there was a property that sold this year. So that's going to hang around for a long time. Payables and accruals is down about $70,000. So the variance really relates to the timing of your trade payables. But if you want to break down what makes up that $650,000, basically there's $250,000 of payroll accruals, of which $180,000 relates to vacation times and other. Then after that, not vacation, sick. You have $180,000 sick liability. Then after that, you have your vacation liability and your payroll accrual. Also, there's $87,000 for the library rent, so that's actually increased $35,000 from last year, so for a year's rent. Then you have $35,000 payable to JACBA, so that's up $12,000 from last year. And then we have our $80,000 Housing Nova Scotia accrual for the deficit. Customer deposits, so that's water deposits, basically the same as last year, people that want to pay in advance. Your accrued pension fund liability, so basically Manulife sends every 3 or 4 years, they do a full actuarial evaluation of the pension plan for your one person still on it. But every year they send an email and they say this is what it's worth, good or bad. So that 52,000 number comes right from them. So the portfolio weakened just a little bit over last year. Deferred revenue is $104,000. That's down $30,000 from last year. So the entirety of that balance, other than $300, is your Safe Restart funding. I know management is working hard trying to find as many ways as possible to spend that money. The province hasn't really given any additional direction, so whatever you haven't spent thus far is sitting in deferred revenue. We have long-term debt of 1.5 million. So that, or during the year, there was one loan paid off. The next one's coming due in 2025. So that just represents our principal repayments, and there was no new issuance this year. So total liabilities 2.46 million, down about 60,000 from last year. Gives us net financial assets just above $2 million. So basically, if all your liabilities came due immediately, you could pay it all off and still have $2 million worth of liquid assets. So sort of $300,000 improvement over last year, which is a positive position. And down in our non-financial assets, so we have the general capital assets. So during the year, there was $870,000 of purchases. That was primarily, there was $250,000 spent to armor rock and raise up Bracket Road. $350,000 was spent on sidewalks, paving, street extensions, $87,000 spent on the backhoe, and $65,000 for improvements to town hall and the fire hall. So against that, we have $670,000 of amortization, so that's how we get our $200,000 increase. Under water capital assets, there was $135,000 in purchases this year. That's $11,000 for a well pump and $115,000 for a water main extension. And there was $145,000 of amortization, so that's where we get our $10,000 decrease. And we have a little bit of prepaid expenses for insurance and items, and then a small bit of inventory for public works supplies. So your non-financial assets, $14.9 million. So when you look at your accumulated surplus of just about $17 million, you're not sitting on $17 million of cash. Basically, $15 million is sitting in the ground or being driven on. So number looks good on the first page, but the second page gives it a little bit more depressing side. But again, that's the way you'd want it. Your assets are to the benefit of the members of the town. Pages 6 is just goes through your change in net financial assets. I'm not going to dwell on that. And page 7 is your cash flow. So basically, how did you add $400,000 of cash? So you take your annual surplus and you walk through your non-cash items. Then you factor in your investing, so your proceeds on disposal, acquisition of capital assets, then your repayment of long-term debt. Those two are good accounting pages that no one's gonna want to spend too much time on. Then, as we've already been through, pages 8 to 14, that's the detail. And then once we get to page 15 to 30, these are note disclosures. So pages 15 and 16 and 17 are identical to last year. On page 18, I'll just draw attention. There's some new accounting standards that are not, as of this audit date, they weren't effective, but they're effective for fiscal 2023. So there's just discloses what the new standards are. The most significant of that would be the Section 3280 asset retirement obligations. Page 19 just gives a breakdown of your long-term debt between the various debentures, opening balance, repayments, interest paid during the year, and then also breaks down your 5-year principal repayments. Page 20 we've already been through. Page 21 and 22 just gives a lot more detail to the capital additions to their various functional categories. Page 23 outlines your commitments to other organizations and significant contracts that you have. Page 25 outlines the pension plans, which we've already talked about. You are contingently liable for a loan that Digby Area Recreation has. So you split that liability 50-50 with the municipality. So you're technically on the hook for $41,000. There's been no history of any issue there, so there's no expectation you will have to pay on that, but it has to be disclosed. And then we have to disclose remuneration to council and senior management, and then expenses they incurred during the year. Page 26, just some more disclosure on the payables. You have a credit facility, and then outlines the tax sale surplus policy. Page 27 is the budget reconciliation. So we have to do adjustments for public sector accounting. Most of these are for consolidation purposes. So whenever there's sales between the water commission and the town, they have to be reversed. So under on your revenue side, when we go through that, $44,000, that's property taxes being reversed. $128,000, that's the admin fees to the water commission being reversed. 16.5, that was sales of materials. 197 is your hydrant fees. And then we budget for the gas tax funding and then your significant capital projects. Then down below on your expenditure side is obviously the opposite effect of all the things above for water commission consolidation, and then we budget for any amortization figures as well. So that's how we get from the approved fiscal plan to your financial statement presentation. And then pages 28 to 30 are segmentation. So this is a requirement, though it doesn't necessarily mean a whole lot. You don't budget this way, but basically it breaks down your revenues and expenses between segmented categories. I mean, you don't, you have $3.3 million in tax revenue, and you certainly don't spread it amongst these categories based on this, but it's required to be here, so we put it in. If you looked at the water commission, that's a lot more accurate just because it's smaller and the categories are a little clearer, but again, it's not really how you go about things, just has to be there. So that is the condensed version of your financial statements.
You did a good job condensing it. I'm getting concerned about the mayor's expenses of $37, and I think I've exceeded those this year, so.
Oh, I'd hope so.
Any comments or questions for the audit committee? We asked a few questions, but there was nothing that we had concerns about. We're always pleased to see that we're in a surplus position, but we know it started officially inflating with the extra money last year. So.
Yeah, and as you're aware, you know, some pipes can burst and can go the other way in a hurry. As far as we're concerned, there's no issues with the audit committee, and we're always happy to report that, you know, we have a good rapport with management. The audit process was very smooth. Goes as well as can be expected, so we're all's well that ends well.
The question I asked him was, if we were a private company, would you buy shares in us based on these financial statements?
Oh.
No. Okay. Well, that's not a good answer. So.
Maybe if you could sell all that sewer for $15 million, I'd think about it. But
someday there'll probably be a market for it. So.
Yeah, I feel like that investment might be 10 cents on the dollar at best.
Yeah. So if there aren't any further questions, then we need to do a motion to accept this financial statements. Is it?
Yeah, that's coming up.
Oh, way down. Well, let's get it done under there now. No, we can do it later.
I trust you.
You trust us? We're on camera, so you have to be careful. So, no other questions?
You decide not to pass. Somebody just needs to call me tomorrow.
Yeah, we will. We'll give you a call in the morning. Okay, thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay, we'll move right on to the minutes of the previous meeting. Everybody's had a chance to look through those. Any errors or omissions in the minutes? If none, can we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Seconder? Any discussion on that motion? No. So out of the motion, and that's why there's some folks here tonight, we've been approached, I think, more times this last year about birds and wildlife than I have had in my years on council. So unfortunately, the only way the town can react, other than neighbors working together and trying to come up with solutions, we can't get involved unless we have the tools to allow us to get involved. And we've never had a bylaw to address the feeding of wildlife. So we're in the middle of proceeding that, and we've had a couple people that want to come and speak to that bylaw tonight. So first on the list is Davina. Is that Davina? Yeah. Yeah, and if you'd like to just make some comments about that, you wrote a letter, I think, here. Yeah. Yes, you did.
So I have asked my neighbour repeatedly to please stop feeding the pigeons, and she won't. So the only reason why I love wildlife, of course I do, but I don't love it when they're living on my stain. It stains so bad, and it's horrible. They're in my backyard. I don't want them. So that's why I'm here, because if they stayed in the forest, great. But if we keep feeding them, they'll always live in our yards and roofs.
Yeah, I do wildlife photography and principally birds. I don't feed the birds this time of the year anyway, and I don't this year in particular because of two diseases that are going around, avian flu and the other one I can't pronounce. But so the feeders are down and they've been recommending to keep them down probably for a year or more. Actually, we just, the town and the Board of Trade are guardians of Fair Island out here, and our guardian of the island, the biologist, went out and looked, and there's a huge die-off of birds out there, and it's because of the avian flu. And feeding birds is how it's one of the ways it spreads. So, and pigeons are particularly bad for making messes. Before this bylaw would go through, all we could do was do the same thing, but we didn't have the tools to make any kind of enforcement on it. And I can appreciate pigeons, because if I started tracking them to my bird feeder, the bird feeder goes down. It's the only way you can do it, because once they home in, they don't go away. So you have to stop the feeding of the pigeons and then they'll move on to the neighbor's bird feeder. No, so no ability, that they just refuse to cooperate and.
Yeah. I even asked her if you could change it to a different window, because that's her entertainment. But she doesn't have another window that she wants to move it to.
Yeah, and DNR has issued saying do not feed birds right now. It's recommended during the winter season to feed songbirds and stuff because they're stressed, but they don't even recommend that right now because of the disease going around. It's killing a lot of birds, even shorebirds and stuff. So. Has anybody got any comments on it? Tonight is a second reading of the bylaw.
She said she was done. I'll pick up from there. Yeah. My name is Gary Terrio. I have a business next door to the Tourist Bureau and the Fairway Insurance. I'm in between the two. I took over the business from my brother going on 60 years. And the first couple of years that I started fixing up the place, there wasn't any pigeons around. It wasn't a problem. But the business across the road from the bandstand got purchased, and that individual started crossing the road for a small bucket of bird feeds every day, one in the morning, one in the afternoon, every day. I approached them regarding bird droppings on my building, up on the roof. Got 3 new heat pumps that are covered with bird droppings, and they're glued there like cement. It's been a dry summer. No rain is going to wash it away. So I approached them, and I spoke to them regarding feeding the pigeons, because the numbers were doubling almost every 2-3 weeks. Instead of 10, there was 20. Instead of 20, there was 40. And it got to the point that I went across the road, knocked on his door, and I said, we got a problem with pigeons that are getting overfed day in and day out. And if you don't slow down or stop, it's going to get worse. So he said, Gary, I'll do what I can for you. He just smiled, and I said, okay. Just move out of town somewhere with your feed. So anyway, the next day, here he goes across the road, in between the bandstand and the Tourist Bureau, kept feeding them. I don't have anything against birds. I actually had a bird feeder home at the very beginning of the summer. The little birds showed up. That's all I know. But the pigeons showed up. And I saw the pigeons started hanging out on my house, on the property. But what turned me off the most was the raccoons at night showed up, digging out the llama at the bottom of the bird feeder. And also I noticed there was about 5-6 raccoons when I took the flashlight out. They were on the deck, they were on the furniture, they were all over the property, and there was 6 raccoons. So you have more than pigeon problems, you've got raccoon problems in town that are being fed by the bird feeders. They don't mean wrong, but it creates a problem. So I took down my bird feeder at the house, and a couple of months later, I had no more pigeons, no more raccoons, and my lawn turned nice and green. wasn't all dug up. So I'm for this bylaw, that the pigeon has to be, the way they're being fed by this individual that need to do something about, and same as this individual next door neighbor, there's more in town here that probably do the same. I support the bylaw should be put ahead. And I have a letter from an individual that was given to me because he couldn't be here tonight, and I'll read it out loud. I would like to inform council that I am in favor of the bylaw, which calls for the banning of feeding wild animals, which includes pigeons. Ever since a gentleman has been feeding a huge flock of them in the area of the Visitor Information Center, they often invade my property, which is nearby at 18 Mount Street. They are causing destruction to the shingles of my house as they pick the grit off them. In closing, let it be known that I totally support the bylaw to put an end of this feeding of the pigeons, etc. Phil Robertson. So I'll leave this letter behind for you guys to file it wherever it needs to go. And I hope that you find a way to be able to control this feeding frenzy that these innocent bystanders are getting bombarded by bird droppings. So I'm in favor of it. This letter for another individual as well. So that's.
Yeah, if we don't have a bylaw, all we can do is try to work with the neighbors and try to make peace.
Yes.
Passing a bylaw doesn't mean we're gonna go around chasing pigeons or raccoons, but if we have an issue come forward, then we have the ability to address it. And hopefully through negotiation, but if it's not through negotiation, then unfortunately it becomes,
You can't throw them out of town. You
Oh, no,
can't,
no.
you can't handcuff them.
no.
You can't set up a firing squad. No. But the individual loves the bird so much that if there's an injured one, he'll take it home and he'll nurse it to health. Then so it's a shame that it's an overfeeding abundance. He goes there with bread. I noticed him with half a loaf of bread, middle of the day, just breaking the bread up in little pieces, and it's, so you'll have to do what you'll have to do, I guess, and hopefully you may be able to turn that around somewhat.
One of the organization that takes birds into to rehab them won't take birds this year because of the flu. They had a call from somebody in town. Well, actually, somebody that was in town that I know called up regarding a bird to the facility not far from the one on the eastern shore, and they said, no, we're not taking birds because of the avian flu. It's unfortunate, so should just let nature do its part. Any other questions from anybody else?
Was there, just ask Tom, was there complaints because it was on town property, the bandstand bird?
Not that I received, but I think that I did sort of get some complaints from the VIC staff, but.
That must be making a mess on the tourist bureau too.
Well, it's more than the tourist bureau, the picnic tables.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They're all
it
over
is.
the picnic tables.
Yeah.
These bird droppings on the picnic tables. And when I approached him, when he was feeding them one day, I said, don't you see the problem that you're creating? Those picnic tables, those pigeons, it's not a tree, but they'll hang out on top of the picnic tables, and as soon as they fly off, the bird droppings fall all over the place. So, visit the facility, being the tourist bureau, the bandstand, and on my property, just look around. You'll see all these bird droppings all over the road. And the big rain we had the other day, I was hoping it would wash some of it, but everything is cemented there right now. It'll take quite a bit of rain to wash that out. But the pigeons are all there. They come and go all day. And I see 50, 60 of them sleeping up on my roof on the water backside. And I can bang on the side of the building with a stick all I want all day. They're gone for 2 minutes, then they're right back. Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen them. I've seen the flock land there on the VIC.
And you'll see them fighting to get on the bird feeder.
Yeah.
You'll see 5, 6 trying to get in there.
They'll eat it up until something falls. Yeah. So it's not just the birds. The raccoons I'm sure there's a ton of raccoons around town that go from one bird feeder to the next, and wherever else they can find something to eat.
The next step beyond that is rats.
I've seen that as
I've
well.
seen them, they're crossing the road to my property now from the building in front of me.
But some organizations on Montessori encourage bird feeding during the fall and winter because of the huge drop in the bird population.
Yeah.
But they do also provide information on how to keep your area clean, so you don't attract the rats and things like that.
Just to control the feeding. When I see him with buckets twice a day, and he told me, he said, you can set the clock. He said, they're all here for 4 o'clock in the afternoon and 10 o'clock in the morning.
And he thinks it's fun.
Yeah.
His little pets.
Yeah.
That's what happens. Yeah.
So
Okay.
I made my piece
Yep.
with this tonight, and
Yep.
do you guys have more to say? Did you want to have any input? No.
Oh, that's fine. Okay, no, good. So you don't have to hang right here all night.
No, that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah, we appreciate hearing from you.
Yeah.
Good.
Thank you very much.
Okay, you're welcome.
I'll leave this with you.
Sorry, Adam, the staff will take that letter. Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Next, Virginia.
Okay, I'm the opposite. I'm 100% against this bylaw.
Yeah.
Just so you know, my neighbor and I have come to agreement. I stopped feeding the birds, and he says, if you stop feeding the birds, I'll let you feed the raccoons. Because I've been feeding the raccoons since I moved here in 2019. Even our premier of the province likes raccoons, and he watches Jim, the raccoon whisperer, who lives in Churchill, Nova Scotia, and he has over 500,000 followers feeding his raccoons. I've only ever seen one rat, and the cat's killed that rat, because I do have a trail cam that I keep an eye on my raccoons and what goes on. And one night, my neighbor, she, with her houses in blackness, screamed at me that it was illegal to feed the raccoons, and I told her, no, it's not, and that her husband said, it's okay that I can feed them. And she said, no, he didn't. But since then, they haven't said any word to me about feeding the raccoons. I did move the dishes, because I had little finger bowls for them that were on my deck, so I got rid of the metal dishes, and now I feed them on plastic dishes, which are down beside the cemetery, because I live right next to the cemetery. So now I feed them the cemetery, the bowls of their dog food, but I give them the dessert of their marshmallows and cookies on my deck, because I can hand feed them. They're very friendly. There's no rabies in Nova Scotia, and they don't cause any trouble. My neighbor's dogs make more noise than any of the raccoons ever do, because they're tied out and they let them bark. They've never told them to stop barking anytime I go into my property, so my I don't even want to sit on my deck because of their dogs. And I can hand feed them, and there's lots of land around. The cemetery to this side, and then I've got right down, is St. George below me. It's all just land. So the raccoons stay there. And I've named them. They're all friendly. I can hand feed them. And like I said, I really like the raccoons. I don't have any entertainment here in Nova Scotia. To me, it's very boring living around here, because nobody has horses. I'm a horse person, so I get my enjoyment feeding the raccoons. And there's also the feral cats at my place. I look after the feral cats too, and they can go in my shed. And the raccoons and the feral cats seem to get along. And so I don't know if anyone's ever watched the Raccoon Whisperer videos, but you see his are all the same way as Earl tamed. And the second year I moved in, Bernice had her babies up in my carport. So I started, looking after them then. And if this unfortunately does get passed, you have to keep feeding raccoons until they go den, because otherwise it'll start causing trouble. Because it was fed for 3 years and all of a sudden the food's dried up. So that's the most important thing. I hope this doesn't pass. Again, my neighbor and I have come to agreement. I can feed my raccoons if I don't feed because I've got pheasants that come, so I was feeding the pheasants and the pigeons. And it's strange, I don't have any bird droppings on my roof, and I feed them, or my deck, or anywhere around, so I don't know why these people are talking about all the pigeon droppings. So that's what I just like to say is, like I said, to suit her, I moved the metal dishes that maybe made some noise. The dishes that I feed their dog food in, I put them on the ground close to the graveyard. And so now they're just getting their cookies and their marshmallows on my deck, so I can at least watch them for a little while. And they may sometimes, one may fight with the other, but it's not that much noise. And they all, like I said, the raccoons get along. And like I said, that's why I'm against it. I like feeding the raccoons. And where I live, there's no houses close by, well, except for my neighbor. And, you know, and also, if those, you know, these neighbors, you probably know them, because they have you on speed dial, because anything happens, they complain. They complain that I put a stovepipe in on my porch so nothing can climb up onto my roof. They complain that when my door blew off, I put a blue tarp on, so I hear all by myself, all my family's in British Columbia. So I put a blue tarp. They can't even see the blue tarp, but they complain about having to look at it. Across the mall, they complain about air conditioners on it. When the garbage shed burned down, they complain, oh, that's a mess. And I said, hey, I'm the only one who sees it, because I live right across, and I don't care if the garbage container's now open, it's not contained in the shed anymore. But these people like to complain about everything. That's their lot in life, and like I said, they have dogs, they bark all the time, they're tied out, you know, and so they don't bother to fence their yard. And then probably if they fence their yard, then probably, you know, then like they complain about the feral cat sometimes crosses their yard to go, because the feral cats like to go over to the cemetery all the time. Like I said, there was no rats, there's no mice, no nothing, because I guess either the raccoons go after them or the feral cats go after them. So there is no problems with rats around. And like I said, I can show you pictures on from a trail cam of the raccoons, and there's never any animals on besides feral cats that are really nice feral cats. So that's what I just like to say, that's why I'm against this. And I think people should be allowed to feed raccoons, because there's no problem with them. You know, to me, they're almost, you know, like they come in, you watch Jim's videos, they can come up, you can hand people their hot dogs and everything like that. It's kind of neat, you can interact with wildlife. And like I said, a lot of people feed raccoons and nobody has a problem with them. And I don't know why people are calling the raccoons with rats, because we have raccoons, there seems to be no rats. And I mean, rats are usually over Tim Hortons where there's nothing over there because they don't take care of their garbage. So that's just what I like to say, and I hope you don't pass this, because my neighbor and I came to agreement, and he said, yeah, you can feed those raccoons as long as you don't feed the birds on the yard. I don't feed them out in the yard. I have one small, almost pet pigeon that I put a small handful of corn on my deck, and she comes and eats that. But other than that, I no longer feed them on my lawn. So and all the pigeons, just, you know, all the pigeons went away. There's only like 2, right, that are there now.
And as I said earlier, the bylaw, you know, we always hope the neighbors can work on agreements, you know, to solve things. But if we get complaints, we have no tool to even come and speak. We come and speak, but we have no tool to say, listen, make the changes or not do it at all, etc. So that's the point of the bylaw. It doesn't mean we're going to drive around town hunting for pigeons or raccoons. But if we get a phone call saying there is an issue, then this allows us as a municipal government to step in and say, listen, what can we do here to make this work? So that's the gist of it. So.
Like I said, my neighbor and I have worked it out. At least with like he has, I don't know. And they haven't said a word since that night she started yelling at me, so.
Yeah, well, and that's what we hope neighbors will do, is come to an agreement on things.
I think she didn't realize her husband told me that I could feed the raccoons.
The pigeon issue, I've seen 40, 50 pigeons on a VIC down. It is bad down there.
But I stopped feeding them, and there's only my couple that come around. And like, I think they were somebody's pets because they're too friendly. Because you can walk out there and those 2 won't fly away.
Okay. Any questions for Virginia?
I did look on the Nova Scotia Land and Forest webpage today, and it does say raccoons are a host of a number of parasites and diseases that can affect people and or pets, including canine distemper. We've had abandoned houses before with 40, 50 raccoons in them, and they do get a disease. Rabies, no, there's not a case in Nova Scotia of rabies, but there are a number of diseases that they do get.
I said all my raccoons, you know, they look healthy, but like I said, if that's passed, like you can't just say, you gotta stop feeding your raccoons today, because you have to feed them until they go until they den.
Yeah, I see the reason why that is that they stop hunting for their natural food sources. And if you cut them off and not used to going back and looking for their own food sources. Any other comments? None? Okay, well, thanks for coming, Virginia.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, we'll see you. Yep. And I did go online, look at the YouTube videos of.
That's good.
Yeah, they're online there, you can look at it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
When, like, if you make a decision, will it?
It gets notified, published and that kind of stuff, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Well, yeah, and that's it. You've heard some presentations tonight, so, this can be the final reading of the bylaw. We want to continue movement with the bylaw. And I feed birds. I'm not doing it now because I'm very well aware, and I stopped in the spring because of the disease going on. And I keep my area below the bird feeder cleaned up. I don't have a raccoon issue because I wrap my pole with stovepipe, so they can't get up anymore. They try, you can see when they slide down. So that prevents that. There's things that you can do in the Audubon, those sites show you how to deal with issues, but,
Seagulls have been a problem in the past too, people feeding seagulls.
I sat at a kitchen table just down the street here between two
Yeah.
neighbors,
Yeah.
having issues with seagulls. And seagulls, believe it or not, are a protected bird in Nova Scotia. You think there's millions of them, but there's not like there used to be, so.
We feed the birds, and when we see a problem start, we bring the bird feeder in, like you, we brought it in for the summer.
Yeah.
But even just in that short little period of time, I have 2 light vehicles. I had to take power washer to them, try and get the.
Yeah, there's stuff.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I'm in a treated area.
Yeah, no. You don't have your kids in the dark area.
Yeah, it's tough, and I know her quite well, and she's here alone, but we did talk with the fact of disease and unhealthy diet and stuff like that.
But it's true, you can see them even in our neighborhood, you can see them make the circuit. They come to our house, they go across the street, they go down to the neighbors, they feed this one and that.
Yeah,
You know, every hour on an hour, you can see them sitting on the wires.
Yeah, they're pretty smart,
Yeah.
pretty smart.
I don't think you'll have an influx in calls either. I just think it's just like you said, it's a tool that if someone has an issue, then it comes up.
Yeah, we're not saying don't feed birds.
No.
Like Tom said, we can't address it unless we have the tool behind us to go out and say, listen, let's reach an agreement, or unfortunately, this is what's gonna have to happen, so.
And it's not a ban on songbirds. People still gonna have a feeder as long as they don't cause issues. If they cause issues, we can still address it, say, listen, the reason that you're having these issues is because you're not cleaning underneath or not keeping care of your feeder and things like that, so.
I mean, I took mine in because of the disease, but also I get the pigeons there, you know.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't get pigeons, I guess, I'm too far out of town.
We'll bring some over.
No, well, you can, but there's nothing there for me right at the moment. So tonight,
So you need a motion for a final reading, is that what you need?
Yeah.
I'll make that motion
recognize it.
for the final reading of the wild birds and animal bylaw.
Seconded that. Second. Any discussion? So I hope that we go through this, that the first discussion with neighbors is, come on now, let's be reasonable here, let's make peace. That guy going with buckets across the road, that should not happen. I did see the pigeons there, I've never seen anybody feed them, but there's a lot of pigeons.
Once this bylaw is enforced, that particular one, because it's our property, it's town property, public property, we don't need a complaint to do that. I mean, we've already had staff see that, we had the mayor see it, we've had.
That's where my question was going, couldn't we already, because it's public property, couldn't we have stopped that going on?
Well, we probably could have, but we didn't have.
Better.
This is better because basically says that we can't feed on public property and on private property. Other than, your own, if you're not causing, if somebody wants to feed birds or pigeons and they can contain them in their, have cages for corn and contain them in their own yard
Yeah.
and not be a bother to anybody else, you know, that's still the roots, because we do not have the resources to go out and patrol for pigeons and, or other things. But we will, you know, there's some complaints we have to address those complaints.
Yes. Okay, no other comments on that, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Nays, okay. Yep. Okay, moving on, CAO report.
Okay. Under fire inspections, there have been 2 fire inspections taking place on commercial properties at 125 First Avenue and 9 Water Street. The inspections reviewed the complaints that were received at the town hall and also to the deputy fire marshal. With Chris Thibodeau, who's worked for the municipality, who's a building inspector in training and also fire inspector in training, is currently reviewing their file to compile a list of multi-unit residential buildings of those requiring fire inspections. So basically, what you're going to do is identify the residential properties in town, the multi-residential properties, and see when or if they've ever had a fire inspection, and make a list. And after he gets his list compiled, and he gets his certification as fire inspector, and in the interim, if it's an emergency type situation, they'll use the chap from Clare, fire inspector from Clare. The thing with the fire inspector in Clare, he's a very black and white person, right? There's no, you know, if there's any shades of gray, it's pretty dark. And that's the thing with fire inspections. And the meeting that we had with him, Bruce and I had a meeting with him and Chris and with Tyler Pulley of the municipality to discuss our needs. And he said that just wanted me to relay to council that, you know, if he goes as a fire inspector and he deems that an area is, or a building is unsafe for habitation, then he'll be issuing an order immediately for, right, we won't be waiting for council to say, yeah, we're gonna evict everybody in there. He has the authority to do that himself, right? So I just wanted to make sure that I relayed that to council that, he takes his job very seriously. And, I think, also, Mr. Thibodeau, he's gonna be, on the ball as well. He may not be as, he'll use a little bit more gray, you know, and, so.
Does it, when we did it to one building in town, there was some comments from the province about, why didn't you tell us? Do you think it's worthwhile drafting a letter, just saying we're gonna be stepping our game up here on inspections, and it possibly could result in some buildings being shut down, so they're prepared? And it might help our case in around housing too, public housing, good quality public housing. Because when we emptied one out down the street here, we did hear from, 8 people had to find places to live in a hurry. And justifiably so, they had to come out of that building. And there's more like that in town, so.
But we weren't the ones that complained about that, the residents complained about that.
No, they did, yeah,
Yeah.
but I'm just thinking whether,
Yeah.
we just let them know that we are going to be stepping up our enforcement in case it does happen. Yeah. So maybe they'll look at Digby a little closer in regards to buildings and properties. Because, on the weekend, I was chatting with a lady with a 4-year-old that was living in a tent, trying to find housing. housing, so that child was starting school today. And, unzipping a tent to go to school. Well, fortunately, she got moved into a place temporarily, just people in the community stepped up, but.
Well, when it becomes a safety issue, then you have no choice.
Well, you can't turn a blind eye to it.
No.
Yeah.
I guess he just wanted me to, like, council be aware that, there are some things like the two, things that they already done, but they were commercial properties. But the thing is that he filed a report, he didn't close the business down or, or anything like that. He said, these are your deficiencies, and, you have so many days to correct these deficiencies, and when they're correct, then I'll come back and do a re-inspection, and if you're fine, you're fine. Right? So, he didn't mean that he would, it depends on what he finds, the infraction that he finds. If he finds that, the building could burn down in any, because the electrical was so bad or something like that, he's gonna, because he doesn't want that on his conscience, really. And I guess he just wanted to, with the climate, with the political climate around affordable housing and everything else right now, he just wanted to make sure that council was aware that, so that's a possibility.
It wouldn't hurt to write a letter and make some points in it that, they haven't given landlords an increase in probably 50, 20 years. So yet they said, you still get 567. Like, how can you give an apartment to somebody for 567 with everything included? So they've never increased that. And that's why they live in such a bad, environment, most of them.
I think that was the reason that we got so much flack, is because almost every tenant that we evicted down there were social assistance clients that they were paying for.
It's really annoying when you see what happens now, and the ones that I think across from the municipal building seem to be the worst ones. Society at large is good enough to provide a place for someone who can't really afford a place to live, and they can't even mow the lawn. But yet you hear of, a 4-year-old child ready to go to school living in a tent. It's almost like, what's the point system?
Exactly, yeah, to get there.
You only have a finite amount of resources and a really big long list of people in need.
Yeah, it's just, and I'm getting more and more of those, and maybe others are too, but I'm getting more and more of those all the time. And not far from DB, there is a bit of a tent city.
Yeah.
15 minutes from town, and people looking for places to live.
Yeah. There was a girl, homeless girl the other day, and I guess she's getting a siesta next week. They're opening up to some shelter, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's person's mentioned in this.
Yes, it is.
Anyway, okay, Tom.
The next DB district heating feasibility, pre-feasibility study. And so I did have a Zoom meeting with Jamie Stephen and Gene Blair of Torch Lake Fire Resources, and also Evan Namath of REN, to discuss moving ahead with the pre-feasibility study. So they will be looking into the town to provide some data that would be useful to the study, such as energy use, heat demand data. For example, in municipal buildings, schools, arena, district energy, and that was performed a few years ago for the DVA. More information on commercial buildings, and reach out to PBSC to see if they have any data available that is not in the public data, and also any newer planned or possible developments.
Lockheed Martin did that one a few years ago. Lockheed Martin came into town one day and wanted to do a study on the district heating system. So they started one, but didn't really much.
So Next one, Emancipation Day, so I attended the ceremony held at Promenade on the 11th of August. The ceremony was well attended and considered a success. And I would like to extend my thanks to Kat Kovalenko for taking the lead in organizing the event, and also to Leslie Britton, Keith Camo, and Brody Milner for their assistance before and during the event. Royal Canadian Legion branch number 20, so I met with Karen Milbury, Donna Flattery, I guess that's what and Tom Cottle of the League Legion on Thursday, the 25th of August. The topics of discussion were the grants to organization program, improving communication with the town, and they are also interested in starting the veteran banner program. So I've asked them to provide information on the program and what they may require from the town, and that's under that information or letter is under new business. The Golf Pines, DP Pines Golf Resort and Spa. I met with Charles Otter, the new vice president of resort operations. Met him on Friday the 26th. And the purpose of the meeting is an introduction to each other, and he wants to open up the lines of communication between the town and the resort. He most recently came from the Mahone Bay area, where he became the chair of the Burkett Chamber of Commerce, changed it to the Tourism and Chamber of Commerce, shifted the business community to a place-based marketing of Mahone Bay experience, spearheaded the spruce up of the VIC, and completely shook up their Father Christmas festival.
That caught my attention. When I'm thinking of Christmas values.
And he has many events planned for the Pines through the winter. He wants to collaborate with the town and welcomes the opportunity to help the town become a successful destination. And he's looking forward to addressing the council in the near future. So I invited him to come to present to the council and just to introduce himself and as a council properly. We had not had anybody from, since the purchase of the Pines, we have not had anybody come to speak to council about anything concerning the Pines. So he said he will be sending me a letter in the near future. So the video surveillance is basically in a nutshell that just that it happens so rarely that we have a good news story that video surveillance played a crucial role in, and so basically they were. The couple was very impressed, especially the husband, with our video surveillance, and how we were able to track the suspect down, or actually see her pick up the backpack and actually follow her up and down the streets until she disappeared in a certain thing, and that was the area where we did find the backpack, complete with all its contents. So
Well, passports.
yeah, they had passports, and apparently they just come to town, and they were staying at Dean's, the Fundy Suites, and so they come to check in, and the room wasn't ready. So they said, wait half an hour or something, and the room will be ready. So they were out walking about, and that's why she had a backpack still with all of that information in it. So she said even her cash was there. We didn't see the cash when we went through, because we we went through some of the things to make sure it was the right backpack, and found her passports, and found her driver's license, and, so anyway, the surveillance system actually paid off that day, and so, and with the camera upgrades, I think it had a lot to do with it, because the pictures are a lot clearer. And the last thing is the slip and fall, so, over in the Marshland Yard parking lot. So the insurance company has assigned an adjuster, and is taking over the file and communicating with the lady and her family, and at this point, they've not communicated with me any decision that's been made, whether they're paying it or not paying the claim or whatever.
Well, that's what they're hired for. Any questions for Tom? Comments?
I guess the only thing, once we find out the result of the slip and fall, we should be getting hold of the DNR to say, listen, we're paying insurance on your property.
Well, we're not,
So
technically.
sell it, so,
Yeah.
you know.
15 feet in the middle of it is what we had a letter of authority for. But they'll be drug into it too.
Yeah.
Yeah. But ultimately, we'd like to have.
Ultimately, we like to have it, so,
Yeah. And then we can do something with it.
yeah. So we should inform.
Yeah. Okay, moving on to Digby Area Recreation.
Reports in your package, you can answer any questions, try.
Moving along. Splash Park, I see Yarmouth has opened up theirs.
You know, I've been to Yarmouth almost every weekend for the past 3 months, and I have seen 3 kids.
Oh, yeah. We've done some other things here too, where there's that initial rush and then.
Did you do your interviews yet, Peter? Did you do your interviews yet?
We did, and the lady that we had hoped that would take the position, she changed her mind, and so we re-tendered. The other two didn't fit.
Dana.
I didn't get to the meeting, but the report is there, and I don't miss very many of them, and that was one I had to miss, so.
Did they get their funding? They were expecting?
Well, they got the funding through the COA grant that they approached the town about putting those data, lobster bass, stall days, and wharf, they all got some funding.
And it's covered in 6B.
Yeah,
In
the thing there.
So my question is, because if they were rewarded $20,000 grant from McCullough, do they have enough now, kind of get by?
Yeah,
So they have to actually complete what it was for.
Yeah.
Cause we sponsor, the ACOA grant agreement was between the town of Digby and ACOA. And we have to, account for the money, right? So we can't just write a check to data.
Right.
They have to get the work done, and if they wanna pay it, they can pay it and give us the receipt, so we can prove it and pay them back, or we can pay directly. We wanted to pay, we would like to pay the vendor directly, right? And then it's a lot neater trail for us, for our final report on the thing, so. Yeah, so basically, we have not expended, or they have not gotten the 20 grand. It's been approved, but until they get their website updated.
Yeah.
Yep.
And the other part of that was the CSJ program?
Yeah, it wasn't going towards salaries. So where they are, I don't know that. Do you know, Peter, if they? No. You see, even with the eventual passing of the marketing levy, which we're gonna move on here tonight, it's still gonna be months, after January first, it's still gonna be months before they get any sizable funds. Okay, any other comments, Peter? Nothing?
What is the CSJ? What is that?
And summer jobs.
Yeah. Okay, audit committee report. We have a report from the audit committee. The motion there to be made. Who's on the audit? Me, Pete, Paul, Councilor Paul?
I missed it.
You missed it, so, yep.
Deputy mayor, probably stepped in for you.
Yeah,
Thanks.
he did. He did a good job, but it wasn't safe for that chief. So.
I know, my questions would have been very pointed. Are you finished this yet?
Yeah, well, they're long and dry, but they're very important, so. Someone wants to put a motion forward, sir, on that? Anybody was at the meeting, did he?
I'll make a motion
Or
that
anybody can?
that we approve the town of Digby's consolidated financial statement for the year ending on March 31, 22, as presented.
Seconder?
Second.
Any discussion?
How much should we pay for this? I know we have to, I'm just curious the amount.
What is it, $20? Yeah, they're expensive, very expensive. I forget exactly.
Well, it's gonna go up a little bit this year.
Yeah, there's some new,
Yeah, they do.
I forget the name of it now, they have to do, they're required to do, I think it was $1,000 extra just for that.
But actually because we have to have that done to satisfy NSUARB, for the water commission. So technically, that increase will be paid by the water commission, essentially.
Does that change what the water commission used to do? Or is that in addition to?
Now, well, see, the thing is, it's the same thing that we've done. The only difference is now they have to do a different type of qualification for these non-consolidated statements that we give for the water commission, right? And so, in order for us to pass them on, I mean, we had I guess we could have said, no, we don't want the auditor's opinion or whatever to go with it. We just submitted it as being the town's financial statements from the water commission. But we said, that's not what we usually do. And it's always got something from the auditors that we send, right? So they can't, we didn't want the NSUARB to question and maybe flag us for future deeper dive type thing in the financial things. Not that we've got anything to hide, but we just don't need anything else on top of everything else. Right, so.
Okay, so all those in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Motion carried. Moving on, correspondence regarding, well, two things here now, the purchasing of some land up there adjacent to our community garden, and, some interest in the property that we're looking at. I've read through this a couple times.
It's a little confusing.
Yes, it is. I don't know if our position has changed on the land adjacent to the community gardens, but it was felt that we didn't want to sell that piece of property for.
Well, my question is, you asked for a fence, but we can't control the wind, we can't control what trash people throw away.
I think we were planning to put a fence along there. It just hasn't transpired at this.
Okay.
I guess the thing is whether it's gonna be a wooden fence or just gonna be a continuation of what's the chain link fence up along there, right? Right now, there's significant amount of vegetation not as though we would be cleaning up anything that
Yeah.
would blow over there anyway, but, so,
Notice there was Westford Valley, there was a tenter. And if you look at where the gates of the community garden are, and kind of takes a little L there, they were tucked in there. And I thought, well, smart of him, because there's a washroom right there.
Yeah, during the rally, there's lots of that, you just gotta kind of know what's going on. But in regards to this letter, I don't know how you want us to address it, he's got an idea on how to, if we kind of said that we want to retain the land there next to the community garden, but it suggested that we buy the house next door. That's kind of a common way of keeping our land.
Most citizens, if they wanna do a flag thing, they come and they present something in a diagram. You never brought anything, right?
The other thing is, and I talked to the CEO, he's interested in this piece of property, but he hasn't acquired the property that can be developed on it.
That's right.
So, other than saying, in my, different ideas, but I think we keep it, because there is potential there for that garden to grow.
Yeah.
But at the very least, show that you have land to build on. There's no land, they don't own land to build on, so if we sell this, and then there's no further development, well, we sold a piece of land that could remain valuable to the town.
Well, you asked him if he was prepared to develop it, he didn't have an immediate plan.
Yes, so do you think our answer's the same? No, we're not interested. In regards to the other property, well, that's not, we're looking at that.
yeah, I mean, at this point, I've not heard back from either our lawyer or their lawyer. I mean, we're just saying that, assuming that something's gonna go forward, but, but at this point, we don't own the land, and I think the only reason that, he even know that we purchased it is because, the gentleman that was representing the seller had a discussion with him, because he had to call him, tell him that they weren't accepting his offer. Because, he would ask questions. And, so, I sort of knew that this was coming, because it was sort of said that he was interested in buying the mini home.
Yep.
And I guess my 2 cents worth is, the only way we should sell that mini home to, especially that individual, is if it leaves town boundaries.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's just gonna be another, if he puts it on another piece of property that he has, it's gonna be nothing but headaches and headaches and headaches.
Well, we were looking at fixing up and seeing if it was habitable anywhere or not.
Well, you see, and that's the other thing, council hasn't made a decision on what, when it gets acquired, what it's gonna do.
Still kind of waiting to hear from Ed, the condition.
Yeah. Yeah, because if it can be repaired, then we could sell it at a nice sum of money, but we don't know that yet either, so we can't even answer that.
No.
No. So, I think the position is, we're still not interested in selling that piece of land, because right now, there's no development going on.
So what this, he says, also at the very beginning, maybe before the meeting, July the 4th, 2022 began, the Mayor, Ben, also made a comment about its council responsibility not to be considered to increase in town's tax base, but also the consideration of contributions to the community. Question still requires answering. It changes subjects.
Yeah, I'm not sure what
So is the frontage of this 10-foot strip of land, no matter how deep, required to meet the subdivision requirements which could be at any depth from 1 foot to 150 feet, keeping in mind the above statement of what would be more beneficial to, I mean, it has nothing to do with beneficial, it has to do with bylaws and
Yeah, I
what
don't know
size
where,
it's supposed to be.
that comment, he threw at us when he was here, but developing town
Yes.
inquiry. But
Yeah.
to then turn it into that, I don't know what I don't understand that.
Yeah, it was a little bit condescending too about
Yes.
whether or not we're interested in, yeah.
We are interested in
Of course.
development in town, yes. But we could sell a piece of land that could be used for community gardens, but with no commitment that the property next to it is gonna be purchased and developed.
Right.
Because they have to, whoever buys that property has to negotiate with three, is it? Three landowners? And one's already said no.
Mhm.
So,
I've also heard that he's planning on flipping this Church Street property in the near future, put it back on the market.
Well, he offered, it's in his letter.
Yeah.
And I'm not a real estate, but that seems like an awful lot of money for a house that doesn't even have a basement or a good foundation on it. It's just crawl
That's
space.
probably about 3 times more than what he paid for it.
Probably.
yeah.
And I wonder where he came up with that figure, whether that was his.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, but in regards to Mayor Ben saying, well, yes, would be interested in seeing development in the community. I'd say that to anybody.
Well, if he's interested in low housing too, it shouldn't be priced.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Anyway, I guess we'll have to draft after, if we're still not interested in moving on that piece of property. We have to just say no, and, in regards to the other piece of property, well, we can't take any comments on that until it's acquired, so. Yeah. Okay. No notice of motions, active transportation resolution. This is in regards, to the funding that we. Yeah.
We got funding to do the active study for an active transportation.
So they just wanna make sure council
Yeah.
is aware, agreeing,
Yeah, I guess this is part of the requirement that if the council gives each administrative officer the authority to execute the agreement on behalf of the town of Mayberry. So that's basically,
Make that motion.
yeah, we got the money to do it, so it's nice.
I'll second that.
Second that, any discussion on that?
That's sort of a partial plan already.
Yeah, the staff downstairs have come up with some great ideas, but there has to be, well, consulting with us and public consulting.
so this is, don't get it confused with our accessibility plan. Right, okay.
Yeah, that's another.
We'll get you in the door, we can't get you in.
Okay, all those in favor of that, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? None. Remember state banners, they've certainly caught on around the province, you see them posting,
I had a few, I tried calling her to leave it a couple of times, so I couldn't get a hold of her. My questions would be, are the timelines too tight for this year? What size banners, because we have 2 different size hangers. What would the cost, because I don't want to endorse it as a council and then come to find out it's, $1,000 for a family to get a banner. And I kind of wonder too about people being the way that they are. Is it going to become, my dad's banner was at the end of town last year and I want it in the middle of town this year, and do you have to pay for it year after year after year, or is it, there's only so many that you could put up, and I would think there would be a greater long list of people who would want to do it.
there would be, the banners, I think, $150, something like that.
I mean, I think it's wonderful.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. But they do have some challenges there, numbers.
In my discussion at the meeting that we had, and, they said basically all that we want from the town is the permission to be able to put the banners up and, of course, probably ink put them up,
Yeah.
right? And their time frame is gonna be right around Veterans Week, so it's gonna be shortly after our summer banners go down and before our winter banners go up, so that time frame fits. I've talked with Ed concerning this and his thoughts, and he's in agreement. He doesn't see anything wrong or any reason not to participate.
Are banners double sided? I can't remember, I'm looking at them all, they're double sided, so how many banners do we have downtown? Yeah.
Good question.
So,
It did tell me, I can't remember.
Yeah,
but
I've heard the number before.
they're gonna basically look after the whole, they're gonna formally set up
Which
what
they
the
should.
program is, they're gonna sell banners, everything, all that they're gonna provide them to us. And then when we take them, if council gives permission, then when we take them down, they're gonna take them and store them, look after them, you don't even have to store them or anything. And, I think that probably it'll start out smaller, because like you said, it's a good point with the timeframe. I mean, we are in September, but I mean, I think they just wanna, to know whether they can
Yeah.
get a start on it.
And do they can keep going perpetually, or? And what happens if in the second year it rips? Who pays for the repair or the replacement? Do you
They would look after whatever, and I don't know, it would be whether, we got damaged by a storm or something,
Yeah.
or what,
But if they're gonna store, means that they're gonna keep them, and are they gonna be like Reese and, sell them every year?
Right.
Well, but that's up to them.
That's up to them.
That's up to them.
Doesn't
The poppy campaign, that money can be used for something like that. That poppy campaign money is pretty specific. They can't use it for capital or anything, it's gotta be used. I'm not sure it would be small, because the towns that have done it, they fill holes right up, yeah. Like, I'd be interested, my father's a veteran, your father's a veteran.
Yarmouth looks beautiful. They have lovely ones
Yeah.
down there.
I do think, if we have 30 banners, 60 people, we have a lot more that were veterans, so how are they gonna manage that? My banner didn't go up. Yeah.
Can you put them, back to back?
Well, you can make them double sided.
Yeah.
But I guess there's always the potential they're gonna come to us and say, we need more hangers put up. Yeah.
I mean, they could do terms too, like you could buy 1 year, 2 year, 3 year.
But
And sell so many of
it's
each.
a great idea, it's hard.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to say no to it, I just wonder what you're thinking about.
Yeah, just in particulars would be nice to know.
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, it might be an opportunity, I mean, we don't have the hangers yet, but it might be an opportunity to get them up Warwick Street in the future.
And while we're on the subject, and you're going to speak with them, Tom, maybe you could ask, and I certainly would be willing to volunteer. They had some organizational challenges last year for the Remembrance Day service.
Yeah.
Could
Yeah,
we
we
help?
talked about that briefly,
Yeah.
and that was what I meant by my report saying about communication between the town and how we can collaborate tonight, because,
We have
yes,
a
it's
PA
it's
system,
the
we have
Legion, but,
computers, we have,
it's our town, and we need to cooperate to make sure, because a bad Remembrance Day service is gonna reflect as bad on the town as it is Legion, as far as that goes, right? Maybe even worse on the town, because, that's the way it is.
Well, the citizens think it's the town, they don't.
Yeah, their radio system or their,
Boom box.
Our own PA system has the ability to patch in and do nice stuff. And I did speak to him too after that last one. That listen, why don't you come to us and we'll.
It was, just to give you a story, just so you know, and I shake my head because they know when November 11th comes around every year at the same time. They had at the high school some challenges, so I volunteered and I helped them. And I shot a lot of pictures of veterans, and I made videos, and I did the last post, and the whole night, and it was wonderful.
It was nice.
And the next year, they called with a week's notice and said, "Oh, are you available to do what?" Well, no, sorry, I'm playing in the band in Annapolis. I don't have time. Sorry, like, yeah.
But they're struggling.
Yeah.
But I think.
If there ever, I mean, we're more than willing to help. I sure am.
And I said I would be too.
And can I just?
Yeah.
I'm not supposed to speak, but my husband, who's also a military member, has offered to help them as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
And they've declined his help in the past, so
Yeah.
it's unfortunate that there are people that will help, but.
Yeah, I had that conversation yesterday at the Christmas dinner, so I was at a meeting with them. Okay, so what they want some support from us.
Well, I think we should.
Oh, yeah.
And I'll make that motion if that's what they need.
I'll second that.
Yeah, okay. Tom didn't work out the details.
Because basically we can coordinate, we should be able to coordinate with the summer band coming down.
Yep.
Maybe leaving them up maybe a week or so longer, and then taking them down, put the new ones up as we're taking the other ones down. Because that saves costs, right? We're already there, labor, and so, it can be worked out.
Well, we just had a motion that we offer. You can word the support in this program, so it's been seconded. Any discussion on it? None, all those in favor? Aye. Any nays? None. Draft marketing promotion levy bylaw, yeah, this time.
Round two.
Huh?
Round two.
Round two, yes. Is it round two? I thought it seemed like a lot longer. So we got the bylaw. Tom, no change to this other than dates?
So the only, this is exactly the same as the other one, with the exception of section 25. It says this bylaw shall take effect on December 31st, 2022.
Yeah.
Right? And the other one is the repeal, number 26, which is the town and Beacon marginal levy 2022-01 hereby repealed.
Yeah.
So that's, and the municipality is, their council meeting this month will be the first reading as well. So that's where we'll be at.
Just, it doesn't change anything provincially, that part's done, right?
That part has been done, and
Twice?
And, I think, yeah, we've got that in writing in more than one person, so, yeah.
Still never got in the meeting with the minister, just asked how this would all go.
Yeah.
Never got a meeting. Okay, so we need just a motion to recognize this in first reading of
I'll make that motion.
the bylaw.
I'll second that.
Yep. Just as it was, it doesn't really apply to this, but I listened to, Community Navigator on the news, how important they are, community navigators. This kind of is a piece of Community Navigator when they hire somebody to do marketing. It was on the news yesterday. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? None. Boundary review, this is what we have to go through, how many every number of years, Tom? Sarah?
8 years.
8 years, yeah. The last time we went through it was, 8 years ago or so.
2014.
Yeah.
Before the 2016 election.
Election, and it was, the discussion, it ended up being, that's where we reduced council size. Yeah. There was a public meeting held. We chose to have, there's different ways of doing this, we chose to have a public meeting on council size, or we went out to the market, not market, to the residents. And it was felt, to reduce, so council discussed that at large, and we did it.
So what I put together,
Yeah.
this article, or this document, is what is being suggested by staff that to accompany the survey, right? So this gives background and everything else concerning it, and explains the public engagement and how they can provide. So basically what we're looking at is doing this online survey, but also have the same survey only in paper form, and so people can pick it out, or pick it up, or they want it sent to them by email, we can send it by email, and, that way, everybody has a chance. And when I done the survey, I, was doing research, and I said, how do people know, or how does the people assessing or reviewing the survey know whether they're a resident or not, right? The actual town resident. Especially online, you can go on there, because actually, Town of Bridgewater had one. I clicked on the survey and filled it out, like I said, I was not a non-resident, filled it out and submitted it, right? Just so I could get the question, right? But, the thing is, that's number one, are you a resident of the town of Digby? And how they hit it is yes, no, or I don't know, because some people don't know if they're a resident or not. And that's why the next question is what your civic address. If we have their civic address, we can confirm that it's within town limits or it's not within town limits.
So they didn't have that on Bridgewater, obviously.
They didn't have that one on Bridgewater,
Yeah.
but they had it on, I think Mahone Bay was the other one. And Mahone Bay had what's your civic address, because it's, so.
And people don't know if they're in a town or a municipality. Like the number of people from Bear River that got a hold of me and asking why they couldn't vote for me during the election was astounding. Like,
And I get invited to functions in the district all the time. I've been to functions and I've looked around and said, where's the wood?
But none from Bentassa Lake called.
But yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, it is amazing. They don't know where they live. But anyway.
It's a little tricky when you go down to Tideview to know where the cutoff is.
The cutoff is, or you come up by Lighthouse Road.
Yeah.
People don't realize that yellow line is the boundary.
I filled mine in and gave it to Leslie already, so.
Yes, that was for review people, not for you.
I filled mine out too. Can I pass it in? Like, I live in town.
Obviously, or you wouldn't be sitting there.
Yeah. I have a question now, where the town line used to end on Shore Road, is it extended now technically because we own the property farm?
Well, we own beyond that, the town line's beyond that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, well, yeah. When we take Shore Road over, that'll be a non-issue, yeah.
So, anyway, I just wanted to find out if this is the process that, council wants to pursue, and, because it's gonna be, a public hearing, our own public hearing as well, to be, as part of the public engagement, and, we have the survey, and then we have the public hearing, and some people who said, well, I didn't know what the survey is. We can have the survey, copies of the survey available for that night, and if they can get one, and they prefer not to stand up in front of other people and say something, they can at least fill out the survey and pass it in, right?
Could we have a computer terminal set up at the meeting for them too?
Yeah, we could probably do
Yeah,
that. Because basically it's gonna be one of them, what was it, monkey?
Survey monkey?
Survey monkey, yeah.
I will tell you, I think at the last boundary review meeting, there was only one or two in attendance.
Yeah, we don't get, we get a fair amount of response back, and most are reasonable. It's the odd one that just, but yeah, we may.
I think I might take out under how you can provide your input, Tom, you've got at the town website, and then an @ sign. I mean, it's gonna confuse people with what's trending now, hashtag, and you can put @ for Twitter.
Okay,
and
I'll
you
put
can-
the word at.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
yeah, some will,
They're using every little symbol for every little thing. And have different-
yeah, no hashtag, well, I use hashtags, but I did, I hate them now.
Oh, yeah, so, I guess the other thing in here, I just arbitrarily put some dates in here, so I really want to,
What's the deadline on the final deadline?
well, we don't have to do it till sometime before March or
Oh,
something.
I get it.
But the thing is, I mean, I do wanna put this in, cause this is the 6th of September. October is gonna be, that's our regular council meeting, I think a month from now. Is that gonna be?
3
Because we
weeks, yeah.
still gotta get the stuff prepared, right?
November?
So maybe have it, the deadline is for the public meeting is in November,
Council meeting, right?
at the council meeting. Is that okay?
Because it's November the 7th is the first Monday.
When's the FFCMG?
That's the first week,
Okay,
first
so
and
it's not.
fourth.
Okay.
First is the, oh, that's
In
not,
that range, yeah.
No, they shouldn't. Okay. Does
yeah,
that seem reasonable, November, and that gives staff time to get everything set up and get
Yeah.
here, hear what the public has to say? Realistically, as far as council size, we're down to 5, we can't do much.
and I mean, that's why I put some of the background and some of the stuff in there, because basically, it does support the status quo, both in not having districts, voting districts, and also in the council size.
You seem to be right.
Yeah, because we're not,
We looked at that,
and, when the information that I think Bridgetown or Bridgewater had, they only need 2 or 3, but see, they do have wards, I think.
Yeah, they have,
The town of Bridgewater, I think, had wards, so they only looked at people, ones that had wards, to support having wards, I think. That's how it went.
It was just this weekend I explained the difference between the district and wards and the town, mayor, ward, and how everybody acquires the rules. That was somebody that, should be well versed. But anyway. Okay, so we're aimed for November, and the staff will get that out.
In the meantime, that'll give us time to we can start putting out the survey, at least wire, surveys is online. We can get set up and going, get going. Because those ones there, we'll give a report at the end whenever we shut it down, so.
And salaries are all over the board.
Yeah.
All over. Annapolis County, the board was 40, approaching 50, the municipality, the district of Digby is close to 40. They were discussing salaries one day on Digby Talks or something. And
Bridgewater's mayor is 69.
just 69,
That was funny when our own auditor said we had given ourselves raises. Well, we don't give ourselves
self raises, no. Yeah, that kind of, I was thinking of letters. But when they were discussing the council salary, town council on Digby Talk, somebody stepped in and said, why are they so low compared to others?
Right.
Someone did look at that.
True though.
You're not here for the money, so it is what it is.
But it isn't true.
No, you soon learn that it's not a figure right now. Yeah, okay, Tom, that looks good though, that comparison with other units.
And on the survey, I guess that's what the other date, I had September 30th, which is, down in we'll change that date as well, probably the end of October.
You, T-shirt for the survey you filled out?
We can.
Well, not all of them. It might be 2,000 surveys this time around.
Random draw.
Yeah.
Survey participants.
Right,
fill in
right,
their
right,
name.
right.
Or if it's bait, you'll get some town of Eden swag.
And a tour of Waterloo Center.
Yeah, okay, that's the last thing on the agenda. Anybody wanna make a motion so you can go home?
Move.